Hi guys, I don't have an intro yet, but I need to figure one out. But I'm just gonna pretend like this is an organic way to start the video, so yeah, let's go with that. Today I want to talk about 10 myths in the furry fandom and how they're untrue. Completely untrue, false, fake news myths. Yeah, let's get into it, let's do it. Now, before I begin, I want to start by thanking the brilliant minds behind the International Anthropomorphic Research Team, specifically Dr. Sharon Roberts and Dr. Courtney Nuka Plant. They've done some fantastic work in terms of getting valuable statistics around this fandom, and it's with that data that I can even make this video. So, I don't have any hats, but horns off to them. That's the best I can do. Now, numbers are pretty cool things. They can show us things that we can't otherwise see. Now, of course, growing up, we were taught not to judge a book by its cover, but we still do because it's easy. Life is fast-paced, and surface details are sometimes all we need. But there are some books that are far too quickly judged by their covers. The furry fandom is one such book. And why wouldn't? A bunch of adults walking around in giant animal costumes arouse just a little bit of suspicion, right? Rumors and misconceptions have long veiled the furry fandom in a light that permeates unease, leaving others wondering just what the hell are they up to? What the hell are they doing? But those funny things called numbers have a much different story to tell. Number 1. We believe that we're actually animals. And it's an easy assumption to make. Many furries create for themselves a fursona, which they use to represent their identity. A fursona takes the form of an anthropomorphic animal of the individual's choosing. And it can be anything from the simplest character to the most complex and detailed realization of what one may perceive to be their true self. However, furries do not believe themselves to literally be their fursona. The fiction of their fursonas are not lost on them, except for me, because Lumi is real, and I won't let you tell me otherwise. But for everyone else, y'all fake. All y'all fake. What many confuse furries with are what's known as therians, who do believe that they feel themselves to be, to an extent, part animal, spiritually speaking. And while there is some overlap between therians and the furry fandom, in actuality, only about 5% of furries identify as therians. Number 2. It's a guy thing. Fandoms and nerd culture are assumed to be a male thing. With one as strange as the furry fandom, it's of course a fair assumption to assume that it's just a bunch of dudes being weird dudes. But where there's a beast, there's a belle. It is true that the furry fandom is male-dominated. However, females make up just above a quarter of the entire furry population, with a considerable 2.5% identifying as transgender. In addition, another 10% also identifies as genderqueer. And curiously enough, 40% of all fursuiters happen to be female, despite their comparatively smaller presence in the fandom, showing that female furries are much more likely to buy and wear a fursuit than male furries are. Number 3. Furry fandoms are sex-fueled orgies of Dionysian proportions. You know what they say, sex sells. But that doesn't necessarily apply to furry conventions, most of which prohibit any R-rated activity anywhere in the public spaces. Among the largest furry conventions, of course, are Midwest Fur Fest, Anthrocon, and Biggest Little FurCon, all of which attract thousands of attendees and are still growing. It is without a doubt that even though Anthrocon is no longer the largest furry convention, it still remains the most influential in terms of furry history. Its standards of conduct say that all public con space must be PG at all times, no exceptions. Suffice to say, they take their stuff pretty seriously. And it's not like this is the only convention to do so either. I invite you to check out any furry convention website and try to find one that allows R-rated activity in the public's con space. It just doesn't happen. It's not a thing. Number 4, everybody's favorite, it's a fetish. No. Arguably the most prevalent misconception around furries is that this whole thing is just a fetish. Simply put, it's not. It would be absurd to suggest that every Star Wars fan wants to get in bed with a Wookiee. Maybe some do, but most don't. The same goes for furries. Some do, but most don't. For many furries, the fandom is a way to express themselves. Kind of like what I'm doing right now. They look to the concept of anthropomorphism and they see a medium which they can use to better express who they are as a human. Anthropomorphic animals have long resided in the imagination of us humans, from Bugs Bunny to ancient Egypt. It provides a solution to those who don't quite feel like ourselves, which is honestly a problem that plagues the vast majority of us at some point in our lives. Now, to get into the hard numbers, surveys have shown that only 5% of furries have reported joining the fandom because, well, of the not-so-PG-13 stuff. Which is a far cry from what many would assume to be a band of fetishists. And put yourself in their shoes, or pause, rather, and ask yourself, why would I want to do anything remotely sexual when I am wearing a literal carpet? I don't. Number 5. Furries are just a bunch of unemployed losers. Now, yeah, what I'm doing right here is not really the most professional thing in the world. The last thing you want to tell him is, well, I like to ski, I like to cook, sometimes on the weekends I dress up as a giant black wolf named Phoenix Nightfire. It's chill. I apologize for any coincidences, by the way. With that said, furries are still contributed members of society. Surveys have shown that well over half of the fandom members are employed, with only 1/3 currently in unemployment. Now yes, that is a large number for an unemployment rate, but it's also very important to remember the ages of furries, many of whom are still attending high school. Meanwhile, furries are likely to report a rather high level of job satisfaction. And meanwhile, only 1% of furries are currently retired. And let's face it, they deserve it. Get some rest. Number 6, furries are mentally ill. You've got to have a loose screw somewhere in your head if you're willing to pay thousands of dollars just to dress up like a giant animal. A common assumption is that furries construct personas for themselves to hide behind, so that they can avoid reality and become a sort of fantasy self. What this suggests in turn is that furries have a low self-esteem and little to no satisfaction in life whatsoever. But the data begs to differ. On a scale of 1 to 7, furries averaged out at about a 5 in terms of their satisfaction with their life. A similar survey detailing self-esteem averaged furries out at about a 4.5. When compared to other fandoms such as sports or anime, furries showed higher scores on average than their competitors. What's even more remarkable is that furries are far more stigmatized than anime fans or sports fans, which goes to show the mental fortitude and resilience they have in comparison to these other fandoms. What this shows is that the fandom is filled with happy and healthy people in spite of the stigma. Number 7. You can't be a furry unless you own a fursuit. This is the classic Scotsman fallacy. You can't be a true furry unless you own a fursuit. But that just ain't true. While yes, some furries definitely do own a fursuit, that most certainly isn't a qualification for actually being in the fandom. Less than half of furries actually own a fursuit. It is a rare and expensive investment that many in the fandom just have not made. With that said, nearly half of those surveyed said that they definitely wish they had a fursuit, or they're planning on getting one. Irregardless, the furry fandom prides itself on its culture of inclusivity, so there definitely should be no gatekeeping in terms of whether you should actually own a fursuit, or how nice the fursuit is that you own, something which I discussed in my last video. So if you don't have a fursuit yet, don't feel bad about it. I can definitely understand the feeling of wanting one. I wanted one for years. But it doesn't make you any more of a furry than anyone else. At the end of the day, you are as much of a furry as you believe yourself to be. And don't let anyone else tell you otherwise. Number 8. We got to my favorite number. I like it. It's just a bunch of kids. It is a pretty juvenile interest, with many furries still attending high school or college. But there are some furries who are a bit older than the average age of 24. The term commonly used is gray muzzle. This refers to someone in the fandom who is above the age of 30. Now, the fandom has its roots in the 1990s, so it only makes sense that some members from all the way back then have still remained inside the fandom. Gray muzzles tend to be self-identifying, with about 9% actually constituting the fandom. Many convention staff are also gray muzzles, especially considering the sheer professionalism and work that goes into actually hosting a convention which may have upwards of thousands of attendees. So at the end of the day, the fandom isn't just a bunch of kids. And in fact, the only reason it's still alive is because of those adults who've continued to stick around. And honestly, just bless them. They're amazing. Number 9. All furries are gay. When one takes a deeper look into the fandom, they find that, gee, a lot of us are just gay. And if you look in the right places, you'll also find that a lot of the art we make is, pretty gay. And it is very true that the furry fandom has become a safe space for LGBT individuals. But as it turns out, statistics have shown that the fandom has a remarkably even distribution of sexualities. Each of the 3 main sexualities, bisexuality, heterosexuality, and homosexuality, all make up about a third of the fandom as a whole, give or take. And of those 3, heterosexuality still comes up as the largest sexual demographic in the fandom. But in comparison to other fandoms, the furry fandom still does have a much larger population of non-heterosexuals. But that's because we're cool like that. And lastly, number 10, the furry fandom isn't popular. Now this is a myth that I definitely believed in for much of my time in the fandom, but in the past couple of years, I'm really beginning to doubt it. It may seem that the furry fandom is just not popular, that it's this weird niche community that exists on the fringe of nerd culture. By all accounts, furries are definitely weird, but weird is vogue, it's in, and furries are only getting more popular with each year, with no signs of stopping. Furry conventions have accelerated in growth, with attendance numbers in the tens of thousands looking like a very real possibility by 2020. Movies and games like Undertale and Zootopia attract furries in droves, thrusting them into the limelight and bringing more non-furries into their fold. The depiction of the fandom has also become very pervasive in mainstream media, for better or for worse, earning jokes from the likes of John Oliver and Zach Braff. Meanwhile, furry YouTubers garner hundreds of thousands of subscribers, unlike me. And in the city of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Anthrocon has become a classic summer tradition, contributing millions of dollars into the local economy in just a span of a couple days. The fact is, the fandom is a global phenomenon. There are furries all around the world, from France to Japan, Australia to the US. We are becoming one of the most universally recognized fandoms in the world. And with amazing people like Sonic Fox, who frankly I could do an entire video on by itself, furries are getting even more positive exposure to the world as a whole. And frankly, I think it's an amazing thing. For a very long time, I was very nervous about letting others know that I'm a furry, and to an extent, I still am, but I look at the sheer apathy towards that issue that people like Sonic Fox and Majira have, where they don't care if people know they're furries, because it doesn't affect them. And I admire that level of courage. I want something like that for myself. And I feel that as the fandom gets more popular and is seen in a much more positive light, that I think many other furries are also going to adapt that same attitude. I think the future is pretty bright for the fandom, and I'm excited for what comes next. But as for now, I'm just here focusing on this tiny YouTube channel of mine, so I guess we'll find out what happens. Fingers crossed. It's not easy. It's not easy. Anyways, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like this video, subscribe, hit the bell, and leave a comment. I read every comment that I get. I deeply appreciate each and every single one of them. I appreciate each and every single subscriber I get. It means the world to me. So thank you so much. I'm hopefully going to get 1 or 2 more videos out this month. I said earlier that I would do 3 at minimum before I leave to school. And now I'm thinking I might do 2 by the end of the month. I'm giving myself a challenge. I want to see if I can keep up with consistency and I want to see how prolific I can be. So you should expect 2 more videos by the end of the month. I have a lot of fun making these. I have a lot of fun editing them, and really it's just a blast to be doing this. Again, thank you for watching. Have a splendid day, night, evening, I don't care. Whatever it is, I hope it's nice, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Get out of here. Go.